forecasting for
people were
our
just
area
grabbing
the
my
whole
wrist.
summer.
Well, I will.
Okay. I'd like to call the Board of Education meeting for Wednesday, June 25th, 2014 to order. Can we have a roll call, please, Mrs. Schlueter?
Sure, Mr. Alexandrovich.
Here.
Mrs. Evans.
Here.
Mrs. Klein. Here. Mrs. Larson. Here. Mr. Nielsen.
Here.
Mrs. Witkowski. Here. And I am here.
Thank you. Has the meeting been properly posted, Dr. Pats?
Yes.
Thank you. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3 on the agenda is community comment. Per board policy, we allow up to 15 minutes of resident comment. Would anyone like to make a comment? All right, hearing none. We'll move to item 4, approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Nielsen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Witkowski. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Item 5, consent agenda. Would any board member like to remove any item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving consent agenda, items 5A through 5C, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you. Item 6, school board announcements. Are there any announcements?
I just wanted to say I was at the golf outing, and Sarah and all the volunteers did a great job. They made it stop raining just in time to play golf, and the weather was beautiful. These people really know how to put together an event.
That's great, thanks. How'd you do?
It was a scramble, so it was best ball, and I was playing with 3 doctors who belong to country clubs, and they didn't use many of my shots.
Okay. Any other announcements?
Well, there's also another golf outing coming up in a couple weeks for the foundation, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact dates. And there's also the Gridiron golf outing, and I am golfing, Alan's golfing, my husband's golfing. So it's an opening on a team if you're interested in joining us.
You don't have to be good. I mean, she's letting me on the team.
The foundation outing is on the 14th of July.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I want to let the board and Mrs. Klein know that for the 4th of July, afterwards, I think most of the board knows that we're welcome to come and hand out ice cream afterwards. For the Schwans. So immediately after the parade, you make your way over to the truck, which is right near the, well, before you get to the pavilion. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Thank you. Item 7, school board calendar, a regular board meeting Wednesday, July 16th, 2014, 6 o'clock p.m. here at the ECC. Regular board meeting Wednesday, August 20th, 2014 at 5:30 p.m. here at the ECC. And following that, the annual meeting of the electors, Wednesday, August 20th, 2014 at 6 o'clock p.m. here at the Education and Community Center. Item 8, reports and presentations. First, we have the technology update. Ms. Linsky.
You have a link in your board docs to the actual presentation.
I have a question on that. The link, I always have problems with links and the agenda, so if you could just PDF it, because that works better for me. I didn't get a chance to review it in advance.
Attach it as a PDF versus
Correct.
a link? I can do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh,
So do you have access to get to it now, Linda?
Now it works, but apparently must be some settings that where I'm accessing it.
What? Okay, you're supposed to be able to press on presentation, and it's supposed to come up?
Sure, if the link inside, let's see here.
So it says, Google accounts, we're sorry, but you do not have access to Google spreadsheets. Please contact your domain administrator for access. That means I'm not going to get there, right?
Pulling up, but if you click on the link for presentation, it should be anybody who clicks on the link has access. You shouldn't have to have a Google account or sign in, so I can, not sure.
I clicked on presentation, and that's what I got.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, Megan's gonna take care of PDFing it quickly here for us, and should be good to go. You
It's going to be the same thing on the screen.
Same thing
right?
as on the screen,
No
so
problem.
you can follow along there if you would like to. Well, thanks for having me back to do the next update on technology. I know many of you have been waiting anxiously to hear more about the one-to-one and the Chromebook, so I'm going to spend a majority of my time talking about that and some of the logistics behind those pieces, getting ready to implement that in the fall. And then just recap a few highlights from the classroom, some pictures and something activities that happened this past school year, and then looking ahead to next year with our technology plan and where we're heading with that. So I want to thank our team that's been working on the one-to-one. We've had the administrators from the high school and the middle school, elementary school representative, as well as our tech coaches, myself, and Wendy and Jim and Steve and others, along the way, as Nita Judy's been helping us a lot with some of the policy pieces and such. So, but as our group was looking and as we've shifted some of our curriculum and our digital textbooks and some of our pieces, these are the items that we came up with in terms of kind of the why and preparing our kids and how they're going to be using the device come fall. And I won't read all those to you, but a lot of those things we've already put into place, but sometimes they have to do a lot of that still manually, either in written or paper format. And providing a tool in the hands of the students will give them an opportunity to actually do all their writing via word processing and not handwriting it on lined paper and rewriting it on lined paper and some of those other pieces and so forth.
So will that be a requirement then, or can students still opt out and say, I want to write my essay and give it to you?
Yeah, if a student opts out to do that, I'm sure they'd be welcome to do that, but I highly doubt we will get too many students who would want to do that. Now, the other piece of it is it's not just about writing it on paper, it's about something else. She'll show some samples here later, some work kids have been doing. It's about using the tool for highlighting pieces. It's about having students be able to collaborate. It's about having students be able to comment and staff be able to comment and give immediate feedback. That's kind of hard to do on paper and pencil, so I think as we look forward, I don't see that happening as much. If there was a particular reason or purpose for them to need to do it, I guess via paper, we have to have that conversation.
I also wonder though if teachers are comfortable with that, because I mean I work with managers who they can't edit on the screen.
We wouldn't be doing this if teachers didn't have a need for it, because obviously they drive the work. So definitely the teachers know this is the way to get the best quality from students.
What grades are going to be having one-to-one?
Sure, to start out with, and that's actually, I'll take you to the next slide, which leads into that. So this fall, every 7th through 11th grade student will be getting a Chromebook device. The following year, we will be adding, and I say tentatively, grades 5 and 6 over the next couple of years. So when it is fully implemented, we'll be having grades 5 through 12. As you look at this, ultimately we're hoping that the devices will last 4 years. And so we want to start, because we're not starting out that way, eventually we need to get into a device at grade 5 and a device at grade 9 so they can keep them for 4 years. So it's going to look a little bit different over the next few years because grade 7 and 11th graders will keep theirs till 12th grade, and then we'll have to reallocate those to a different grade level. And so we've got a whole plan on how that shift is going to occur. But ultimately, that's where we're going. And I say tentatively, there's been some questions, can we get 6th grade in before 5th grade? And there's some curriculum needs, and so we'll talk about that as the year progresses. But we ultimately want to get into that they would get a new device, so to speak, in grades 5, and then turn that one in grade 8, and get a new device in grade 9, and keep it for the entire 4 years.
Assuming none of these devices grow legs and walk, how much is this going to cost on average per year?
Sure. The devices, and I've got a budget sheet document, the devices are $325 each. And so if you figure 2 grade levels every year, we would be replacing, so approximately 700 students per year. Is that right? 350 per grade level, about, I think is where we're at. So I didn't do the math. 325 times 750.
Oh, yeah, 150,000.
On an annual basis. All right. Just so far in terms of what we've shared out to the parents, we did an initial announcement on May 5th to parents about the one-to-one, the grade levels that will be impacted, some frequently asked questions to the parents that went out via an email blast. With the report cards on June 12th, we sent home a flyer with information about when parent information meetings are going to be held in August during forms and fees days and a few other dates at the middle school, so parents can come and get more information. Coming up here in a few weeks, we'll be sending out a message out to the parents with all the very detailed specifics in terms of a handbook, and that will give them more details of what they might have some questions about related to it, and the parent agreement form that we'll be looking at for forms and fees. And then in August, those meetings will actually occur where parents can come in and have a presentation. We'll go talk through all the different important pieces that parents need to be informed about. There will be some kind of an agreement collection process during that time as well. And then since May 5th, when we did the initial announcement that I've linked up here, we've had an ongoing forum for parents to ask questions along the way. They don't have to wait till forms and fees days or that parent information night to ask those questions. I think we've had 4 questions so far. Things like, my child already has a Chromebook personally, can they bring that instead of the district providing me with one? It's been that kind of questions that we've had. There haven't been anything real significant, just clarifying questions.
So what's essentially on the parent agreement form?
It'll be all the things. The agreement form is really, I've read the handbook, and kind of just like a regular student handbook, here's the process, here's what I'm responsible for as a parent, here's what my kids are responsible for, this is what we have for expectations for kids using these devices. So it's just signing off that they've read the parent handbook and the information that's in there.
And what about, is there anything about, if it's damaged, who pays for
Yep,
what?
yep, I'll talk a little bit about that. That's all in there. There is information in the handbook. I didn't get into the specifics tonight for these slides. I can certainly answer those questions. The district has decided that we are, unlike many districts, we are going to buy the devices fully up front, that we aren't going to charge any kind of fee for the parents on the upfront costs. However, if it's something that is not covered by warranty, which there's not a whole lot that can go wrong with a Chromebook, there's not a lot of moving parts in some of those pieces, that the parents will have the responsibility for those repairs and those fixes. We will provide parents with an upfront cost. If your child breaks the screen, it's going to cost X number of dollars. If they have a keyboard that busted off a key or what have you, it's this much for the keyboard. And all of those charges or expenses will be, they'll know that as part of the handbook up front of what those expenses will be.
Can they buy insurance, or are we insuring them, or?
We are not insuring them. They are a district-owned device. Jim did do some research and checked into it. Parents, we can't ask parents to insure a device they don't own. Is basically what the answer was that we got from the insurance company. So there's not going to be insurance.
So I know some other districts provide or require that they are insured. And I wasn't sure how the presentation was going to go, if we were just going to kind of pepper questions throughout the presentation and wait till the end. Because I know when we did the survey, that was one of the things that came out of the survey, that there would be a shared cost.
Right.
And we're not having a shared cost. The district is bearing the entire cost, and but they're not insured. And I thought that was interesting, because I know many other districts will have that. So there's a small premium that they would have to pay, but the coverage is that much greater, and there's more peace of mind. But you're saying we can't do that, Jim?
The parents can't insure it because it isn't their device. Then it's up to us as to whether we want to insure it, and I spent some time talking to our insurance agent about it. Essentially, we're self-insuring at this point. Why are we not charging the parents? Because it's illegal. If you go through the Department of Public Instruction, you go to the court decisions on what we can charge for and what we can't. This is equipment, and you cannot charge parents for the use of equipment. You have to provide equipment. You don't have to provide a Chromebook to every student, but if you do, you can't charge for it. So that's what it comes down to.
But I suppose if you're a parent and you have those potential items that you're on the hook for, could you charge them for insurance, if they wanted to,
Right, and what Jim just said is based on the information we got from
Well,
the
we
insurance
would
company.
hold the policy, but they would contribute to the
And maybe
policy.
that's how the other districts are doing it. I really
Yeah,
didn't dive into the details on it.
Or,
Yeah, it goes along with providing the equipment free and clear. You can't charge them for insurance on the equipment as well. I talked to DPI about that. Some districts do. It's a matter of time, until they get caught and they get their hands slapped. They can have aid taken away. It's a road that we didn't want to go down. The entire device is $325 if you lost the entire thing. So how much do you want to pay per year for insurance on it? Is another question.
I'm just saying, you make it optional for parents. They could decide, I'll pay my $5 and then I'm done, or I could end up paying $300 for the whole thing. I don't know. Did you think about
Right.
that?
As we look at it, we didn't want to get into the insurance business because someone has to track that for every one of those devices, for every one of those things. Are we getting did they pay their fee? Did they not pay their fee? Are they up to date this year? Do they, is there a deductible? We just didn't want to get into that. It's a whole nother layer. And since it's not a $1,000 device, it just didn't seem worth it.
Okay.
And if they did have a Chromebook of their own, or a MacBook Pro, or whatever of their own, are they able to?
Yeah, we've had some discussions on that, and we're finalizing some decisions. Our concern with a full-fledged laptop is battery life to make it last the entire school day, because we don't have enough electrical outlets, so everybody brought in a MacBook and 30 kids were sitting in the classroom. So we are gonna put some parameters together that'll be in the handbook around that. If it's a Chromebook, they're not gonna get $325 back as a family to not take the district Chromebook. So, we're gonna be spelling that out, and we need to work through all those details of what we're going to accept and what we're not going to accept. And it primarily comes down to battery life and having that consistent device. The other piece of it is startup time. I brought up a sample of the Chromebook we're gonna be getting. They boot up in 8 seconds. So by the time you launch a MacBook or a Windows laptop and it takes a few extra minutes and you're running between classes, we have to take those things into consideration on the right tool and the best tool for what we've decided we want to go down that path for. So we're leaning toward that. Probably we would recommend a Chromebook. An iPad doesn't have a keyboard, so as we're talking about a lot of data entry and those types of things, unless they had that. We're doing a lot of things with Google Apps. It doesn't play real nicely on the iPad. It's not totally perfect in some of the ways it does. It doesn't have the same full functionality as you do when you're on a full-fledged device. So, we have to weigh all those things. We need some consistency for the teachers to expect that the device is always going to be working, that it's always going to be on, and that kids have support with whatever device they are at. So you start letting them bring in. That's kind of why we went down the one-to-one path versus bring your own device. Was oh, my battery's dead, oh, I don't know what's happening with my Mac right now, something's going on. And so you start running into those technical challenges in the middle of a class that could derail what we're really trying to accomplish from a learning standpoint. So we're trying to minimize those factors so that the device is good, the battery's going to last, it's going to have quick boot up time, and we're not going to have those technical issues to deal with from a student or from a teacher standpoint. So, all right. So the deployment, what's it going to look like? So we have about 1,800 devices we're going to be getting here come August. They have been ordered and should be arriving sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks. We have some places located at both the middle school and the high school to store them for the rest of the summer until kids come back in the fall. Our plan is to deploy those sometime within the first 2 weeks of school. We're still working on that schedule. The high school is going to be a little iffy if we're going to be able to get it done in 2 weeks or not because of the large number of students that we need to get the devices to. The students will actually be the ones, they're going to unbox them. They're going to grab their name table label, and we'll have a checkout system just like they check out a book in the library to check out the device so we know which devices are assigned to which students. Once they have done that, it'll kind of a 3-station process, if you will. They will go to a station, they'll learn about how to take care of it, what to do, what not to do, how to prevent it from getting damaged, all those things that we'll also share with families in August about that proper care and expectation for the devices. And then a secondary piece of that will be making sure that they are comfortable with the Google Apps suite and the Chromebook itself. And so the tech coaches are working on a Chromebook camp, so to speak, to walk them through those processes for that part of the deployment. So, and then in each library, at the middle school and the high school, the aides and the library media specialist tech coaches in there, we will be setting up, or there will be a tech depot, so to speak, not a separate room or a separate thing, but that's where the students will be able to go to get help with their Chromebook if they need it. It's also the place where they'll report issues and damage or anything of that sort. So if they need to get a loaner device, hey, this stopped working last night, they could stop in first thing in the morning, we'll swap it out, give them a loaner device so they have a device for the day, and the IT guys will then take care of any repairs and getting things fixed and back going for them. That's also another place where they can ask questions questions. In the handbook, again, without going into a lot of the details, we've been working with the associate principals about what if the kid forgets their device, they don't bring it, what if it comes and the battery's not charged, what if, all those what if scenarios, and what are the ramifications, and it really isn't any different than, I forgot my textbook, I forgot my notebook, I forgot, any other piece. It's your learning tool, and if you don't have it, you're not coming prepared for class, so to speak. So the same process will be with the Chromebooks as it is for any other material they're expected to have in class that day. You mentioned cost. We said that $325 for the device. We did, after researching, there was a new device, and I can pass this around if you guys want to take a look at it. We decided to go with the Asus brand. It's their first new Chromebook, and a couple of things that we liked about it that we were excited about. First of all, it was a 13-inch. We thought 11-inch screen was just too small. Many districts have gone with an 11-inch. We didn't want to go there for the types of things we wanted to do with that. The second thing is we built a nice infrastructure for some faster wireless, and there's only 2 devices that are just now coming out. The Chromebooks are just getting into that arena to have that faster speed for wireless, and this is one that does. So we wanted to take advantage of that, knowing we were going to have the devices for 13 years. And then just, you're always looking at durability and stability with it. Some of the Chromebooks, because of the price point, are cheaply made, to be honest. So you want something that is going to stand the test of time. So I can pass this around. This is power buttons on. They log in with their Google account. This is just a sample case that is my favorite one so far. We've got some different, we haven't ordered our cases yet. This is what they call a always-on case. The device never comes out of it. So it just closes and you zip it, and you unzip it and you leave it in there. So it offers a little bit more protection than them taking it out, the risk of dropping it, that type of thing. So some of the other districts that we've talked to went with something similar to that. So that's what we're looking at, something of that nature. So the bag, I say approximately $40. I think that particular one is $44. We haven't, because we haven't finalized the bag yet. It's going to be someplace in that ballpark. And as we've already talked, families will be responsible for the loss, damage, repairs, just like they would with the damage to textbook or loss of textbook or loss of anything else. As far as the equipment goes, they're responsible for that. So the same thing will hold true for the Chromebooks. We've created a website, and I've linked it up here for ongoing communication and information, and that's been up and going again since May, as well as the frequently asked questions resource that we had sent out to parents initially. We'll go through those, but you have access to that if there's any information on there that you want to review. So any questions or thoughts? That's all I had for the one-to-one side, and I know you've been asking questions along the way, but before I jump into the next topic, Linda.
So does it replace any textbooks, or are we still handing out textbooks, or just the Chromebook?
We haven't purchased.
So there will be no textbooks, just.
We haven't bought textbooks in 3 years.
What about,
Other than AP courses where you're required to purchase them, the teachers, that's why your question earlier about, do the teachers want this? They're dependent upon the students being online because they're using many resources online.
right. Well, my question though wasn't really if teachers are expecting a one-to-one, but the fact that they're turning work in via email. I mean, I've observed teachers who carry around their stack of papers to correct because they're used to, submitting handwritten, and that's what they want to use. So are we making that transition also to our teachers that, I mean, is it going
That's
to
the
impact
responsibility of
our paper budget?
That's the responsibility of our ITL team to help them assist in the transition. Like anything, when you're changing, it has to be thought through. So they have been already meeting with and will continue to meet with the teachers to adapt practices to make best use of one-to-one. Until you actually have every student with a device, you don't exactly know how that's going to work. So it's a transition. That was one of Steve's biggest concerns when we moved to one-to-one, to ensure we were ready. And the teachers were begging for more devices to be able to make the shift. So we know we are at capacity, and the shift will work just fine.
Yeah, and I think we always have to remember too, there are going to be times where paper and pencil is going to be a better choice. I mean, so the majority of the time, yes, we can make it all digital. There may be a time, you're still going to be doing science experiments, and you're still going to be doing other hands-on things that's not going to be glued to the device. And there's a picture later here from this past year that, you know, it's really interesting. They've got like a math workbook, so to speak, out, their laptop out, and a piece of paper. So, you know, it's kind of a combination of all those things for that particular activity to meet their needs.
The expectation is going to be that teachers will use this 100%.
100%.
Will that happen? No. But teachers, for the most part, over the last several years, have figured out if they don't take advantage of the technology, they're wasting a lot of time. We had some teachers a couple years ago that had literally a written grade book, and then we had our power split like that. They were doing both because they just couldn't break away from that grade book. They've since done that. And so the expectation this first year will be a little bit lenient, but we will be pretty firm on the expectation that these are to be used
100% of the time.
100%.
I mean, that's the whole benchmark. So did the supply list that went home with students change this year?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The supply list that went home with, you know, no notebooks?
It
No
did
red one,
change.
green one, or?
It actually did change. The high school and the middle school did go through their supply list and talked with the teachers and made some adjustments. Is it as far as adjusted, as Steve just said, as it could be? Probably not, because I'm sure teachers are still a little skeptical. They still might need a folder, or they still might need this because, you know, we need to make that shift. So, but they did reduce, I know at both schools, the.
But there's
supply list.
different purposes. Journaling and maintaining notebooks, all professionals do that. And students, when they're acting like a scientist, one of our programs requires they keep a scientific journal. And maybe we can get that digital, but to Steve's point, you have to work through that. We don't know the exact look of that until we figure that out.
So they're being introduced 7 to 11 this year, or
Yep.
14, 15. And then, so the juniors this year then will have them next year?
Correct, the following year, yes. So the seniors will have them that second year.
Okay, so we just had to pick a starting point, and that was, so rather than starting with the seniors this year, that's
Yeah.
just, okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion. I know that's probably the biggest question we got was, why not seniors? And so when we looked at where the curriculum implementation pieces were at, who was getting the digital materials, where we needed to put our emphasis on, it fell in that 7 to 11 grade range to do what we needed to do. So that coupled with seniors going off to school, they're probably going to be getting a device sometime soon anyway. You know, a year earlier, parents are willing, they're still welcome to bring their own devices to school. And then it was easier for us to, if you will, to supplement with carts in those senior class areas where there's just seniors than it would have been in the other grade range. So there was a whole bunch of factors that we took into consideration. And then we had a limited on budget. You know, we had we had a limited dollar amount, so we had to pick the grade levels based on need and the dollar amount we had to work with them.
I think 'cause that was one of the questions, obviously, I was getting. And another one is the, and this would be for down the road, when the 5th and 6th grade gets implemented, you know, a lot of the 5th and 6th grade curriculum is done together as they move through. So I just, you know, maybe that's something that we look to do when we can do both.
Yeah, we
together.
talked about that. I think what will end up happening with that, Tim, is one grade level will actually get a device to take home, and the other ones are gonna have carts available in the classroom to still meet that need, but it might not be that individual device
Yeah.
that you see with a one-to-one for that, for next year, and then the following year, it'll all be, I'm sorry, 2 years out. So next year, they will have cards in it, added at increased access. The following year, the 5th or 6th will have them to take home, and then that third year, you'll see that they'll all have it to take home. So it was just how we had to work it in. Now, if something changes miraculous, you also don't want to get, if we wanted the last 4 years, you don't want to get into, now we've got a surplus. But now we've got, as we rotate off of some of our laptops in terms of a replacement cycle, we don't need to have equipment sitting there because now everybody has a device, but we still have 3 years left on these other pieces of equipment. So you have to take a look at that replacement cycle as well and fit that into the mix. So we have a whole kind of 5 to 10 year kind of how we're going to rotate everything through. And as software vendors become current with making their products 100% web-based, we can shift away from some of those other full-fledged laptops and desktops that are needed for, probably never get rid of the ones for like Project Lead the Way and some of those real sophisticated programs, but other areas. Science will be the first that we'll look at shifting off some of their software that isn't currently web-based that they're striving for in the next 2 years. The Chromebook will work for them.
What about at the high school where you can have freshmen, sophomores, you know, in the same classroom,
Yep.
and seniors don't?
So that's where those cards and access to the equipment. So we don't want teachers who have, 30 freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and 2 seniors in their class for those 2 seniors not to have access, and we will be providing access for those class periods for those seniors to have access.
We have a lot of mobile cards throughout the district at grade level, so whatever we need to replace, we can pull out those cards.
They won't have to be able to take it home, though, and
They
do.
won't be able to take it home.
But-
Yeah. But they'll have access during the class time for classroom instruction for what they need. All right. All right, then just, make this bigger here. Just a few things that happened over the course of last year. As we were just talking about how different technologies are being used in the classroom. Just want to share a few stories with you and a few images to put all of that into perspective. This is the first thing. This was fourth graders at Ben Franklin. They did a mystery Google Hangout with their classroom. The audio is really hard to hear, and there's some captions, but I'll play it and then I'll kind of recap. So basically, students from our district and students from Brazil did a hangout, but neither of the classrooms knew where physically located the other class was. So they had to ask some questions of each other's class to figure out where in the world are we communicating. So it's just a minute clip here. Oh, I don't have the audio plugged in. We're not going to tell you where we're from, and then some of the kids asked the question. You heard the temperature question. What's the temperature? They asked, is it snowing there right now, to try to figure out where it was at. So, real neat little opportunity for kids to connect outside the classroom that you would never be able to do without the technology, and make those connections with other cultures outside of the United States. So, this was a science unit. Drawing a blank, I think this was 6th grade. Science, where they had to come up with a theory and develop a sample on it. They picked erosion and what it was going to take and what that might look like. And I'm just going to click over to the presentation briefly here, because I want to share with you, by using some of the Google tools that we're talking about when they get their Chromebooks into next year. This happens to be elementary school. If you haven't done much work with Chrome, this is Brandy Baker's class. This is the classroom teacher. But you see the ongoing conversations and dialogue along as the kids are, these 4 students are collaborating on the presentation. And as we go through it here, you can see, nice job placing the pictures, and you've got this ongoing communication between the students as they're developing this project. So that's what we're talking about when, you can't do that on paper and pencil. There's no longer a need, not that it's a bad thing, for kids to, Mom, I got to go meet at the library with 3 other kids, and finding that common time, because they can real-time collaborate or at their own leisure on a collaborative project such as this. So, a neat opportunity there. Here's the picture I was just talking about earlier with see they got their their workbook out, they've got the graph up with the spreadsheet, and they're still taking some notes, analyzing the data that they're taking a look at here. Visually, always doing some kind of flow charting and diagramming, whether it's in science or their writing processes, they're writing stories and such. This happens to be either brainstorming about dreams, it looks like daydreams versus other dreams in this particular project. This one I thought was a neat, you can see the smartboard in the background, there's some information on it. They've got the 2 girls there collaborating, and others working on their projects together. As we talk about, this is something that you can't really do with paper. I mean, we got highlighters, different color highlighters, coding, working on those different reading and note-taking strategies digitally. So as we talk about making that transition from doing it in paper copy to digital, you can see how they are coding text in various ways to help them with their writing. All right. So those are just a few samples of things that were happening in the classroom throughout the course of the past year. Taking a look into next year, I just wanted to mention here at the end that our technology plan does end next June, so we have one more year on it. I have been in contact with DPI. They're changing all of the parameters and the format and all of the other things. And normally we would start that process this fall and work on it throughout the school year. What I've been told is that it will not be ready anywhere close to September or October. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like next year. I'm kind of waiting, kind of like to know what DPI has expected of us before we start the process. But what I do know is it's probably not going to be an every 3-year plan anymore like it used to be. The goal is to make this digital, electronic, online, and then it would be kind of an ongoing working document, not something you do every 3 years. So that's kind of their focus and their plans to move forward to that. So it's, just so you know, you'll probably see something a little bit different than what you saw in the past and how that works. There's also less requirements now that the government has taken away, believe it or not, some things that we no longer have to do. So I think you'll see it more as a real viable living document versus jumping through some hoops because there's some government regulations around it. So, and that's it. Any other questions?
I have one.
Linda?
Well, I'm just wondering, are we going to maybe do some, like a survey that would kind of give us a baseline on where parents and teachers are at, and then a year from now, do the same survey and see
Where they are at in terms of what?
comfort maybe with the device and happy with the way, I mean, I'm not going to make up the survey right now, but, you know, I know some districts do that where they, and there might be even some survey tools already out there to kind of help us with that. We don't have to recreate the wheel there.
I guess two answers to that. One is, as part of our technology planning, that's always been a prerequisite requirement for the planning, was to get input from parents, students, and staff around various areas of topics. I don't know if that's going to continue from a requirement standpoint. And then in terms of the one-to-one, I think that's something that definitely we're going to need to get some feedback. It's not going to be perfect the first time, no matter how much, you know, background and research and all the districts we've talked to and everybody who's gone in front of us, that we've learned from their experiences. Franklin is still different and going to have different needs, and we'll have to make those adjustments along the way and need some feedback from that.
With the technology plan, did you meet all your goals for the one-to-one?
Yeah, for the one-to-one, I'd have to go back and reread those exactly. I think the goal was actually to have done it last year, not this coming year, to be honest. I think that was the time frame. So the goals in terms of what we wanted to accomplish is there. The time frame in which we did it took us a little longer than we had hoped.
Okay, thank you.
And I was to blame for that. I was real, you know, the one-to-one is, there are a lot of districts that are real proud of all the stuff they have. We have all these computers, and there's some neighboring districts that have a lot of stuff, but they don't use it. And so Luann's committee was not happy with me on a couple of occasions when I said, you need to do more. We need to get this thing figured out so that when we move forward, we know our teachers are ready for it, to your question, and that our kids are ready, and they did a great job, so. I was a pain. I'm glad you did it.
We're ready.
One question I get, and I don't know if I'm going to remember this exactly how it was posed, but there's projects that the kids are involved in, and they're doing a lot of this online collaboration, the Google Docs, whatever, but the parents don't have access to it. They can't see it. Kids can't send it off and show them some of the things that they're working on.
You can share.
What?
You can share.
You can share it.
Sure.
Sure.
I've
Depending on the
gotten shared
tool, but Google Docs for sure. The share, like I shared the file to you, you don't need a Google account as long as you share with anybody with the link. They can.
Do you need to have a Gmail account, or what's?
You don't have to. Not if the share rights are set to anybody with the link. So if I, as a student, want my parents to see it, or my parents want it, can go into that document, share with the link, email that link to my parents, and they can click on it and view and see everything that's in there.
That may be a nice,
So-
something to put together, unless it's out there already, you can point us to it, to say, here's what you have to go through, and here's what you need to do to set up.
Sure.
Because I know one person in particular would be real interested to hear that.
Yeah, so the students should know that, not that they're gonna always be probably upfront with their parents that that's available. They don't want their parents checking out.
Gee, I don't know how you do that. Okay, I get it. All right.
Another question I have, I know we just switched over to Gmail. What was behind that decision, and what does it do for us?
Well, I think two parts. first of all, it integrates all the other tools that we're using. So when we look at calendar, we look at Gmail as we create one ecosystem for students and staff to work within. So that was probably the biggest precedence for going that direction. It's as we also look at, there's some features that we couldn't have done otherwise without going to Gmail. And it also, you could say there's a cost savings, it's probably a wash. Gmail is free technically, but we also only pay for Outlook every so many years when we want those updates and those changes. So I would say that the cost savings is pretty balanced.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's a lot.
Okay, item 8B is the Fund 46 discussion. Mr. Mills, or?
Right, we talked a little bit about this last week. It relates to saving funds for the future to work on our capital projects, maintenance to buildings, additions to buildings, large kinds of things. And the state just came out with Fund 46, which is a capital improvement trust fund, which would allow the district to put money aside yearly or whenever we can to go into this Fund 46, and then our projects would be done out of that. So we wouldn't have a huge expenditure in our general fund in any given year, and we wouldn't have to have those funds sitting in fund balance in Fund 10. We would move them to Fund 46. One of the rules is that you can't expend the funds for 5 years, but for the projects we've talked about, it'll take us that long to save enough money to do some of those things. And then you must have a capital improvement plan lasting at least 10 years in order to do that. So it requires a board vote on the capital improvement plan and a board vote to create Fund 46. And then once it's created, that starts that clock ticking on the 5 years that it takes before you can expend the funds. Helps us out with our aid and any effect on our aid from spending, let's say, $8 million in a year. If we did a huge project, the state would look at us and say, wow, you spent a lot more per student this year. You probably don't need as much aid. We'll take some of that back. This way, it's a little bit every year, and then when we spend the whole thing, it doesn't count against us.
In looking at this list, I'm concerned because they're not prioritized.
I think that's what we want to do is give ourselves as many options as we can in the plan. And then, just like we do now, it's the same kind of thing, but yearly we can prioritize that. And I think for this fund, we're not looking at picking off the small things on that list. Those we'll keep working on with our maintenance account. But the larger things on there, that's what our discussion will be later on, is exactly what are those pieces going to be, and what are we going to use that for exactly. So if we decided Forest Park, then Forest Park would be what we were looking at, or Forest Park and possibly land. But I didn't want to make it too narrow, because right now there's no guidance from the Department of Public Instruction on this. They're working on it, but it could be a year before they issue it. And we want to get started on it, so we don't want to limit what our possibilities are, and yet we don't have to do all of those things.
So if we put together this list, is this something that gets submitted, and then these are the projects that would be on a 5-year hold essentially, or is this just a sum total of what we're looking at? If we want to do some sooner, we could do them, but they just wouldn't come out of that fund?
Right, we can do them out of our maintenance budget sooner, and that's what we'd keep doing as we go into the future. But whatever we decide that are the large projects that we're going to save for to do this is probably the ones we'll actually do. But since it has to last at least 10 years, the thought is that we might as well have as many projects identified in there as possible, because you don't have to do them. It's up to the district whether we do them or not. And the plan doesn't have to be submitted to the Department of Public Instruction. It's just a local plan that we have.
So projects don't have to be on the plan, on the list for 5 years?
Right.
do have to
Well,
be.
all it says right now is that the projects that you do have to be on the list. And you
Okay.
have to have a plan that goes out 10 years. Now, I can't imagine when they write the rules that they're going to make districts create a plan that's absolutely perfect for 10 years, and you can't do a project if it's not on there. There's got to be some editing available. Something comes up that was brand new,
Okay.
or you take care of something, or you had a referendum for it and it passed, and you didn't need to do that piece anymore. And that's kind of why, in our plan, I wrote it that way, to leave the possibilities as wide as can be, that we could work on any one of our buildings or land for any project we needed to do, in the verbal rather than the list of projects.
And is the intention to fund this on an annual basis out of the budget, or just fund it with, at the end of a budget cycle, with anything that might otherwise add to the fund balance? Or some of both?
Right. It would be probably annually, and that's one of the things about this that's better than other options as well, is you can wait till the end of the year and see where you are, and then do something. But we talked about using fund balance for these projects, and so if let's say we came to the end of a year and we had spent every penny that was in our budget, but we had an extra $4 million worth of fund balance, and we wanted to put $1 million of it in Fund 46, we would just make that expenditure of $1 million out of Fund 10 into 46. Now, we'd be technically over budget because we spent that, but that's the only way to get it out of fund balance. If there's any money left in the budget, it would use that up first, and then only the extra would come out of fund balance. But that's the way we move it to a different fund.
Okay.
Can you levy into the fund?
I don't believe so. There's a different type that you could levy to directly,
Different type of what?
fund.
Is it also a new option from the state, or has it always been available?
No, I think that's been available for a while.
When you say a while, you mean 5 years, 10 years, or?
At least 5 years, I think. Yeah.
So with that question, if I understand it, that means that in a budget that would be presented in June, July, passed or whatever, there wouldn't be a dollar amount set aside at that time for Fund 46, because then that would be considered part of the budget and levied into the fund. It would be funded at the end.
Right, right.
Okay.
And we'd have a chance, we actually have until the end of July to put money in there. And we have to have a separate checking account and all of that for this fund as well. So that's one of the things we'd take a look at here as we're closing the budget and we get partway through July. Do we have excess funds and taking some of fund balance to move over there? So I'm thinking this year we'd have, maybe between 500,000 and $1 million we'd want to move, but I want to see where we're coming out exactly so that we're hitting that mark as to putting a good amount in there, but not so much that it's going to cost us aid for next year or a lot of aid. Now, at the end of next year, where we have this big project going on, we may not put anything in there that year, maybe. We'd have to see where we came out. But in the ensuing years, I would see putting something in every year.
But I thought the money that went into the fund wouldn't go against aid.
It wouldn't impact aid, you said.
It doesn't impact aid when you spend it, it does impact aid when you put it in.
Okay.
But when you spend it out of Fund 46, that big lump at a time,
That's the part
then
that
it
doesn't
doesn't
affect
affect
aid.
aid.
Okay.
And when does it? I'm still lost. When it impacts aid when you spend it?
When, in Fund 10, when you make that expenditure to Fund 46, that would affect aid, but then it's a smaller amount. It's 500,000, $1 million, or something like that. That it does
It counts
each
as the
time.
expenditure per pupil.
Yeah, each time you put it in there, that smaller piece would, but when you go to spend the large amount, then
I
it's
see.
unrelated to aid.
I guess I'm with Janet, though, on the list that you presented to me does kind of lack any kind of prioritization or clear plan. I mean, you go from $14 million to, replacing a slop sink. I mean, some of these, I think, could be more of a maintenance item versus really an improvement that's going to last or makes a difference. I guess I'd like to see a little bit more better planning in terms of when you know, what we're doing. You know, replacing exterior doors, you know, you got a range of those. Those to me would be something.
Right, essentially, that's our entire list that's in the budget presentation document.
Is it the end? Because I didn't get a
So
chance to
things that are
compare
taken
it.
out of it are like the pieces at the high school that we spent already, that we had put in for illustration to see what was taken care of by the referendum. And it isn't really our intent to do every one of those. Almost all of those would be done for regular maintenance. But that list is almost $8 million deep of just maintenance kinds of things outside of huge projects like the $8 million or the $14 million. So even our regular budget pace, like we talked about last week, we're up to an amount per square foot where we can keep pace with the things that come up, but we're not going to catch up on $8 million worth of things. So at some point you may want to do that. And since I don't know for sure whether we will ever be able to tweak this plan again, I wanted to make sure everything was in there. And we haven't had a ton of time to work on this. I didn't find out about it more than 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
I think it's fine to have everything in here, but I think there still has to be you know, you must know what is a priority. To, you know,
I don't know
to
whether,
rate it.
we haven't had the discussion of what you even want to spend this on yet. That's coming later this summer, I think, and I've heard some things about Forest Park. I'm really envisioning this as being big expenditures, big projects. But on the other hand, once you pick those off, then what do you have? And if DPI says you can't ever add anything to this once you start it, then I want to make sure everything's in there. We still have to decide what is it that we're going to spend that money on. That hasn't been made. But since we have to do it by the end of the school year, we have to create this and we have to have a plan, I wanted to make sure everything's in there for us to choose from, even if we most likely say 90% of the things on the list we're not going to do, or those are way out in the future if we would ever do them.
I think the prioritization will come into effect in the 5 years when we can start spending Fund 46. And
Right.
to try to predict right now what our priorities are going to be in 5 years seems impossible, actually.
Basically, what we wanted to try to do tonight is, as Jim mentioned, the clock starts running as soon as the 5-year expenditure period starts running as soon as the resolution is approved. And to Jim's point, the reason this is so broad is because if those rules come out and say, well, if you didn't have certain things in that plan, then you can't put them in there, or you can't add later on, we want everything in there. The prioritization, as far as the smaller projects, we do that every year. We get into the spring and Mark and everybody, we talk about this and that. But the prioritization as far as the biggies, the 8 million, the 14, whatever it might be, then that discussion will come down the road a little bit. But it's intentionally, it needs to be broad right now so that we don't lose out on somebody saying, well, you didn't have it in your plan. Or you had this as a priority and we did it through a maintenance, so you can't even, or through the maintenance, annual maintenance deal, so now you can't use that, or that part of the money can't be used for that. So it's meant to start the clock, be very broad, but it'll get specific in terms of the big things, little things. Mark puts that together every year, and what we really have to have as a priority.
In the short period of time that I've been here, we've had this list and it's been prioritized. And I think I mentioned last year, the majority of the things that we did weren't anywhere near the top of the priority list. But the priorities change every year.
Weekly.
Yes. And therefore, to try and prioritize this for what's going to happen 5 years out, I think would be a futile attempt.
Well, I guess I disagree. I mean, I've worked on plans for 35 years. I think good planning is what government should do, and to say we can't plan,
Well,
I
we're
don't
not talking
understand
about,
that. I mean, if we're putting this plan out there, and that plan includes, you know, some $8 million to renovate the middle school. This was a referendum item that didn't pass, but now we're saying we're going to do it. It's right here, we're going
I'm
to do it.
saying we can do it if we choose to in 5 years, and if it's funded.
Well, we're going to fund it because it's in this plan. That's our intent. we wouldn't put it in here, we wouldn't be putting
might not
money in
be
here if that
able
wasn't
to.
our intent. I mean,
Yeah,
where's the transparency?
Each year, we're to determine how much we're gonna put in there. That doesn't mean that 5 years from now, we're gonna have the $5 million to the purchase of land. Might have $1.5 million. Is that gonna change your priorities? I think so.
Yeah, I envision getting to the end of a budget cycle and having you say, well, we can afford to put this much in, or we can afford to put that much in. I don't think it's gonna be a static number every year.
No.
And this entire list is almost $45 million, and so I understand the comprehensive approach. I think, can we maybe put this in a little different order at some point? Yeah, but I don't know that we need to establish that now when we're just talking about establishing the fund, because anything we decide tonight isn't gonna have any bearing or impact for 5 more years. Right?
We're just simply saying we want to put everything in there so we're safe.
Right.
That's it. We determine
So then
later
we're
on
gonna-
what those priorities are.
Well, I understand that, but we're trying, take advantage of an opportunity here. But when are we going to do the rest of the work of saying, sorting it out? This is a maintenance item, doesn't belong in here. When are we going to do that work? Or are we just not going to do that work? We're just going to
Well,
dump it all in and,
part of it'll have to be till we wait and see what some of the guidelines are, but we'll be talking about that on an annual basis, probably about this time or near budget time. I don't know, whatever Jim thinks is best, to be able to say, okay, if we're gonna pursue the $8 million project, then here are some things, that have to go as opposed to a $2 million project. Or if, we might have an explosion somewhere in the district where all of a sudden we're in need of adding on to an elementary or whatever. Well, if we didn't have that in this particular plan, or in our, the Fund 46, we're dead in the water. So we can't set priorities today for that list right there, because 2 things. Number one, most of them won't be taken out of Fund 46, or many of them, I shouldn't say most, but many of them won't be. And the big ones that are in there, that's the discussion for the board to have, and for us to talk about as, even as a community, to say, okay, do we want to put money towards the middle school? Do we want to put money towards something else? Purchase of land, for example. So,
well, I would like to maybe suggest that, as you said, a lot of these minor, 3,000 door project, it's not likely to be done. Can't you just not put them in right now?
And what's the benefit of not putting them in?
The benefit is that we are presenting a more focused purpose for this fund,
Oh.
which is for large, significant capital expenditures, not just a, bucket of everything that might come down the
How's that
road.
a benefit? Now, that's a nice warm fuzzy. It's not a benefit.
The benefit is provides more focused transparency to the community on what it is that we're looking at long-term.
But I hate to use this term, but this Fund 46 is like a slush fund. We don't know how much we're putting in every year, and we can't touch it for 5 years. So it's 5 years from now, we don't know what we're gonna have, and we don't know what we're gonna have to do with it. So to try and set up a priority with all these, and by the way, we don't know what the guidelines are. And now we're gonna try to tick everything off and put it in exact order. It's just, boy, I have all kinds of phrases I can't use to explain that. I mean, it's just getting, it's too much into the minutia. It's not necessary.
And the fact of using that term slush fund is also disturbing to me, that it.
Wait, that's
that's-
my
you
term.
mean, what is that what you want your government to do, is establish a slush fund?
I said I hated to use it, but
But you did.
Better term.
I'm not setting up the fund.
I think the intent of this legislation was to be very clear to the public where you're going. We're going, our goal is to add to the middle school. So we put, 8 million, 14 million, we put that out there, and that's good enough.
but that's just one of the goals, Linda. That's not we're not saying this is the only thing we're gonna dedicate that to. We're saying this list, at this point in time, are all things that we would dedicate Fund 46 towards.
I don't want to dedicate 46 for the doors. I don't want to dedicate 46 for the toilet partitions. I don't want to dedicate 46 to the electrical outlets.
And we
don't
won't,
wanna
but
do
we're
that.
just simply saying that we don't want to get caught of not being able to if we have to.
And my point would be, it seems like we're kind of being, if we don't even know the guidelines, why are we even, what are we doing this for? We don't even know what the guidelines
If we
are.
don't do it now, then we're gonna lose another year. Then we're gonna be out another year to be able to use this.
Well, perhaps now, from now on in the budget, you can do more prioritizing in the budget now that, when you have this then in place.
And that's where you can do we won't have to have this long list on the budget instead.
And as Alan said, our priority list change, Mark, what, every month? Something comes up that changes one way or another, so.
One question on the timing. You're talking about getting this done before the end of in July, whatever. So would this be then considered a 13-14, and the clock would start 13-14?
14, 15,
14-15 would be our first year with the plan.
if we approve it tonight.
Right.
Right.
So it's not, but you're talking about you have time to still put money into 46
Right.
out of the 13-14 budget.
Yes.
But the clock wouldn't start, and it wouldn't be considered in effect.
It's the semantics of getting a resolution passed during
14,
this
15.
year's budget, yeah.
Okay, so we can't, by passing it tonight, somehow do a back date. Not a back date, but you know what I mean? It would like start in 13-14.
Unless that's what the DPI rules are when they come out. They say, if you did it this year, it counts, that's your whole first year. I don't
Be to our
know.
advantage.
It'd be to our
big
advantage.
And I thought there is, if they're
Either way,
allowing
it's
us to
better.
fund it out of money from 13-14, that's why I'm asking.
might
if
do
it
that in their
would
rules.
start- Okay, that's
Sure.
kind of what,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if we have this long-term capital improvement plan, do we also need a policy? Like we have fund balance policy, or do we not need that?
You won't need that because you have the dedicated approval through resolution of a fund that's dedicated towards that.
Okay. Well then,
Can't we create the fund without the list? What's the importance of the list?
You have to have the plan.
Required.
So those guidelines are out, but not the other guidelines.
There are certain rules that were written into it to begin with, but they don't have guidelines applied to them. So all the Department of Public Instruction can tell you is that you have to have a plan that lasts at least 10 years.
Is it 10 years or 5?
10. The expenditure has to last at least 10 years, but you can't spend anything for the first 5. Those are
I
two
guess,
of them that we know.
I mean, I appreciate the legislation, but I don't think their intent was to throw together a list of everything that could ever come up. And if this is going to be our list, I think it needs more work.
I think that the more we limit the list, the more we're tying the hands of future boards, and I don't feel like we should be doing that.
I think the intent is to provide some long range. That is exactly what the intent is to say, you're going to commit to a project. And it doesn't, because boards, you're right, boards they won't be able to get the money out unless there's some thought into it.
But what if we only put that $8 million down the middle school, for the middle school plan in there, and in 10 years we decided, or 5 years we decided, we don't need to do anything to the middle school, then what? I mean, then what would happen?
We can't do anything to the grade schools because they're not in here either, so.
They're in
You're
the
saying we
write-up.
can make a decision whether we want to add to the grade schools or we can add
No,
to the
no,
middle
no,
school?
I'm just saying, because you keep focusing, maybe that's just your example on the middle school, the $8 million to the middle school. What if, in 5 years, when we're able to spend that money, and let's just say, for argument's sake, we have that $8 million in that Fund 46 balance budget, or fund, what happens if we decide we don't really need to do anything to the middle school? Then what? I mean, what would happen with that money then?
That's what we're hoping the rules will allow us to be able to say that we need some flexibility in the plan.
So that's why we need all of these things
That's
on the
exactly right.
list, so we don't run into that problem.
Right.
Well, what if we put $8 million, and it's in here right now, $8 million for the middle school, and 5 years from now, we decide we don't want to add to the middle school, we want to add to the grade schools? And that's not in here.
It's in the written portion,
It's in a written portion. What written portion?
page 1. You have that?
Is that, I thought it had to be on the list. So you're saying it doesn't have to be on the list? It can just be in the narrative?
All they asked for was a capital plan. So the narrative is part of the plan, the list is part of the plan. And I tried to cover absolutely any possibility in the narrative here as well.
says the list is updated yearly.
So, Jim, you're telling me that 5 years from now, even though our list has contained an $8 million middle school project. 5 years from now, if we change our direction and our philosophy that we want to go from, we don't want to go with 3 years at the middle school, we want to add on to our grade school, that we can make that change. Because, even though it wasn't on the list, because you have this narrative that says you can do whatever you decide to do.
What is the project you want to add for the grade schools?
I'm just saying, our direction could be, instead of, the intent of adding to the middle school is to move sixth grade to that level. Is that correct? I mean, that will be our intent. That's been our direction. That's been what we kind of agreed to where we're going. What if we decide that 5 years from now, we learn that, no, that's not the best model? You really should keep your sixth graders at the grade school. So then we would be going in the direction of adding on to the grade schools to accommodate the model that we now would be, we could change our minds.
Our sixth graders are already there, why would we need to add on?
Because of increasing student population. I mean, when we're a growing district, we're not going to be this size forever. So the purpose, I believe the purpose of this and the intent of the legislation was to get some solid, long-range planning that says to your community, this is what we're working on, this is what we're funding. This replaces a referendum. Instead of a referendum where the community decides what are the big stuff.
No, it doesn't. No, it
It
doesn't.
doesn't replace a referendum, for
Doesn't
sure.
replace
Well, they're
referendum
not,
at all.
there's going to be no public vote on these projects.
No, but the vote is the board establishing a resolution that authorizes this fund. Then the district has the obligation and the responsibility and the right to expend those funds as they said. And as you said, it would take a plan to do that. All we're simply saying tonight is we need to start get a resolution to start the clock on the 5-year spending. The other part of it is, and we hope we get some more specific guidelines and things to do, because in 3 years out, we might want to add an early learning center, or we might want to add a whole bunch of things. But to the narrative and to the list, right now, that's what we have to go by. We can play what if for 10 years, but in quite honestly, 10 years from the DPI is ridiculous. Nobody can plan out 10 years. Nobody can plan out 5 years. But that's what we're tasked to do. But if we get the resolution and start the clock, we do have, I think, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, a time to be able to say, okay, next week or in early July, we can say, okay, we're going to update our plan a little bit until we get specific guidelines. Is that fair to say, or is that a stretch?
That's what I'm hoping. I'm assuming that they're going to allow you to change your plan, and it's not set in concrete, or you can only change it every 10 years. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense.
No, exactly.
I'd actually like to make a motion that we approve the resolution as recommended. And do we need to vote on the plan tonight as well, or just the resolution?
Both.
Then I'd like to,
I'm sorry, we need two separate motions. The
two
first-
separate motions?
first we're
Okay,
gonna have-
well, I'll leave my resolution motion as stands then.
Well, then I'd like to make a motion to approve the long-term capital improvement plan as presented by the administration.
Okay,
She just made a
okay, we have a
We have to do two separate ones.
yeah.
Oh, but I thought she said the resolution.
Yeah, we have to just vote on that one by itself.
Oh, okay, well, we didn't talk about the resolution yet. We only did the capital improvement plan.
Well, the resolution is just to be able to start the clock.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
second for Mrs. Klein's.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Klein and a second by Mrs. Schleter to approve the, what is this in here?
Resolution to establish Fund 46.
I'm just looking at this date, yeah. The resolution to create Fund 46.
I thought she would approve the plan. Which one are we doing?
First, Melissa made Mrs. Klein made a motion to approve the resolution first. We have to deal with that first, and I can read the resolution here.
Because it's on the agenda.
That's the other
that way.
attachment,
That's
right?
why, I think that's where the confusion is.
She
That's
stepped
where I
ahead.
was confused.
We're fine.
Sorry.
So I'll read this resolution, and then we'll have a discussion. We'll ask for discussion. Resolution to create a long-term capital improvement trust fund, recognizing the need to maintain the investment that the community has made in the district facilities, and recognizing the best way to accomplish this is through a long-term capital improvement trust fund. The school board of the Franklin Public Schools resolves to create a long-term capital improvement trust fund designated as Fund 46. So that is the motion. And we have a second. Is there any discussion on this resolution?
I have a question. fund gets established, we get 4 or 5 years down the road, getting some money built up in there, what's the process for determining what projects are done? You had mentioned the need for a policy, and maybe we don't need a policy, but is that something that's done through board action? Is that something that's done in the budget document? Or how do you see
It
that
would be
going?
board action, Tim, and off the list, off the plan,
Mhm.
whatever's on the plan. Let's say hypothetically, we said, okay, well, we want to build a new gym at the middle school,
Mhm.
hypothetically, for $5 million. We'd bring it for the board. Board would authorize us to take $5 million out of Fund 46 for the purchase for the building of a gym.
Is that something that the DPI has in their requirements that in order to spend it, it's spent with board action? Or is it just said you set the fund up and your district can spend the money? Because I think that's something that is
Right.
important to have.
Yeah,
I just
I-
think you need to make sure that that's
Yeah,
concrete
I think that
somewhere.
in light of all that we've gone through this year, our process would be that we would internally identify, we got to have this.
Right.
And it's identified in the plan, so we would come to the board and say, here's what we think we need to do. That's our recommendation.
That's why I think we might want to discuss a policy, because a resolution is not a law, it's not a policy, it's, a resolution is a rule, as far as we're concerned. So if we have any questions about the plan, we might want a policy.
Well, that's all I was just asking a question.
It would
What's
set
the-
up a budget for Fund 46, and then that would be part of what we do as the budget. Fund 46 would be another category in there, and when we can decide earlier, but when we get to the end of that 5 years, then you would have a budget for, this is what we're doing, and this is what we plan to expend starting next year based on whatever the project is. So it would follow the normal course of every other fund. We have a budget, and the board approves that. There'd have to be discussion about what that's going to be. I think we'd have that before you'd ever get to that point. I mean, we do have 5 years, but we'd want to have it sooner than later, that discussion.
And where are the rules regarding the time clock and the,
I was on the attachment last week on the agenda. I attached the sheet showing the rules from DPI.
can we reference that in the resolution? And
We
where-
really don't
where's-
need to, because it's an entity. We're just establishing board authorization right now. We're not discussing the rules of the DPI.
I would like to at least review those. How do I get to that?
Go to the last meeting, under meetings.
Under,
Fund 40, it's under the budget.
first draft?
Budget first draft, 9C, and then it says Fund 46. Yep.
I'd like to call the question, please. Can we take the vote?
It's been asked to call the question. You're making a motion to call the question. Is there a second?
Second it.
All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, so give time to review. Oh, I'm sorry, that was 2 noes?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, then, motion is passed to call the question. So, we had a motion by Mrs. Klein and a second by Mrs. Schlueter to approve the resolution to create a long-term capital improvement trust fund. Can we have a roll call, please?
No, it's for the resolution.
Yeah, that was a resolution.
Okay.
Isn't that true? Yeah.
Mrs. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mr. Alexandrovich?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans?
Aye.
Mrs. Witkowski?
Aye.
I say yes. Mrs. Klein?
Aye.
7-0.
Okay, motion carries. And then we had a motion by Mrs. Larson, and is there a second to, I have to get back to this, I'm sorry.
My motion was to approve the long-term capital improvement plan as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Klein. Is there any discussion?
I have a question. So if a year from now, when we see this plan, will it look like it does, or will there be some refinement and more focus?
If we have reason to add to the plan, we will add to it. If we have reason to take things off the plan, we will do that. Otherwise, the plan will be as it's presented tonight. We can't make that prediction because we have a whole year. We don't know what circumstances would change for anything. It changes every single year.
It sounds like because we needed to be more comprehensive in the way we set this up, we may not have the ability to add to the plan. Isn't that what the fear is?
That's the
Right?
fear.
We may not be able to add, but as we peg off projects, this list, I'm assuming, would get shorter and shorter as time goes on.
So our intent is that we would actually be replacing some of these chalkboards with these other boards with this kind of money. We would be doing, everything on this list would be done with long-term capital funds?
It's possible, not necessary.
I think the intent was to provide a holistic and as much of a comprehensive list as we could, but the intent would be to use these things out of the maintenance budget as we've been doing them over the years. But to not pigeonhole ourselves into a corner where if we needed to do something of a larger, I mean, I wouldn't think a $5,000 project would fit the bill, but maybe a $75,000 project may.
God,
Would have that flexibility.
Shouldn't we have minimums on these projects? It's like we don't want to plan. I guess that's what I hear. We don't want to plan.
I don't think it's that we don't want to plan, we just don't want to bind our hands and leave something off that we really find out in 5 years that we really should have put on the list and we never did put on the list. I don't think that's what it is. We're not doing this willy-nilly. We're trying to put as many things on this list as we can, and as Tim said, we're probably going to start ticking some of those things off the list. The $5,000 slot bucket will probably get ticked off the list at some point. But we don't want to bind our hands or bind the next board's hands. Why would we want to do that to ourselves?
Why would we not want to communicate to our community what our big capital items are going to be? Why don't we want to communicate
If
that?
any community member is that interested, and I know that you've said hundreds of times,
They're not.
you've had 2 or 3 questions about the budget in all the years you've been here. I think if a community member is that interested, I am certain that Mr. Cloutier or Mr. Mills or whoever spoke to that person would indicate that, yes, there is $8 million on there because that is our actual intent, or that is our intent in 5 years, or that big ticket item on there is going to be something we're working towards. I don't think that we're trying to hide anything. I don't think we're trying to be underhanded here. I just think we're trying to give ourselves as much leeway as we possibly can. That's all.
I'm not suggesting we're trying to underhand anything. I just think that we should plan. I think the fact that our
community planning.
The fact,
We plan, Linda, and we plan thoroughly every single year, and we plan very thoroughly. So I'm not going to accept that we don't plan. We put a lot of time and effort every year into taking a look at what we need in the maintenance budget. This plan that's presented to you tonight is only a plan presented to you tonight because the DPI said we have to have a plan. Will this plan change? I sure hope so. But if we can't change it, we want to have everything we can think of right now to put on that plan. And that's why this plan is being presented to you tonight. Hopefully, a lot of that stuff will be taken off from a maintenance budget. The big items will be what Fund 46 is primarily dedicated to use. But right now, we're just simply saying we have to have a plan.
I understand you have to have a plan, but my question is, do you intend to refine this plan over the next 12 months?
If we have the ability to do that, yes. If the rules come out and say whatever you adopted is what you have to keep, then no, we can't. If the rules come out and say you can adjust it on an annual basis or whatever, we'll change it frequently. We don't know that yet. We don't know what the rules are.
I just want to say that because, community members have been asked about, what the next big project is, doesn't mean there isn't any interest and they shouldn't be asking. I
I'm
mean,
not saying
clearly,
that.
when there's a referendum out there, there was a lot of interest in where we're going with these big items. So we can't assume that because we don't get any questions, there's any interest. And this is just, this is not a good plan. This is just a list of projects. So I would hope that we could, again, be more strategic, be more focused in our, what we call a plan. And, that's my opinion, and I wanted to share it, so. I do planning on my job. We have 5-year plans, and to tell me we can't plan is really, I just can't accept that.
I would say again, we do plan. We plan pretty
Then
thoroughly.
let's share the plans, yeah.
And the plan that you have before you is a plan that we are required to submit for authorization to move
I don't want to
forward
argue with you,
for-
Steve, but I'm just
I'm
saying.
not arguing. I just want to make it clear that we do plan. The insinuation is we don't, and we do. And we do a pretty damn good job of it.
I think you can do better.
Is there any other discussion?
We don't have a second, do we?
Yes,
Yes,
we have a
Mrs. Klein.
second by Mrs. Klein.
Thank you.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Alexandrovich?
Yes.
Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
I say yes. Mrs. Witkowski?
No.
Mrs. Larson?
Aye.
Mrs. Klein?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans?
Aye.
6-1, motion passes.
Thank you. Okay. Now we will move on to item 8C, District Facilities Naming Request. Dr. Katz.
I received a formal request on behalf of Dave Bartles and the Sabre Stadium Project Committee, and I would read the request to you. On behalf of the Sabre Stadium Project, we'd like to formally request that the Franklin Board of Education approve the naming of the Franklin High School Athletics and Activities Field to Sullivan Stadium. As we all know, Timothy and Vivian Sullivan have contributed a significant amount of money to the renovation project at the school, and quite frankly, without their help and support, this project would never have happened. We feel this honor is well-deserved and will reflect the appreciation of the Franklin community as well. And Dave, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think it speaks for itself, and I think it'd be just a great thing to do.
What we're thinking about doing, should the board pass this, is just simply, if you remember the archway that goes over the entrance to the stadium, it says Home of the Sabres. Right below that would be a band that would say Sullivan Stadium, and that would be it. You're also familiar that the field is named Jerry Marsh Field. That's designated for recognition on the new scoreboard. There's a panel on the bottom of it that signifies that, which is really common in school districts. You can name a field one thing, the stadium another thing. Some people even name the track another thing if they have a facility like that. So it is our recommendation that the board accept this. We think it's appropriate. And as was stated in the recommendation, without this contribution by the Sullivans, certainly this project would not have been able to be realized. And it does comply with policy that we have.
I'm sorry, where is it going to be? You were talking kind of fast, I wasn't. Where's the name going to be?
It'll be right, where as you walk in the entryway, there's a banner that says Home of the Sabres across the top, between the concession stand. and
Right.
Right below that, in the same type of text and same type of
So it'll be
metal.
additional archway, or?
No, it'd just be just a straight band. It'll look real tasteful, just going right across the bottom of it.
That doesn't meet our policy?
Mhm.
Which,
Well, it meets our policy from the standpoint, the very last thing in our policy states that to be recognized or for that, you must have made a significant contribution somehow towards whatever we're thinking about asking for naming rights to.
The policy says a facility may be named after major contributors to the school district without whom new facilities would not have been possible. Or a facility may be named after a person if that person is of exemplary moral character, but this isn't necessarily a person.
and how much was it?
After more, a couple.
$500,000.
How long is this name effective? Is this a permanent name as opposed to 5 or 10 years, or?
It's permanent.
I would prefer, I would prefer officially on paper, and this is my preference, if it were either Sabres Sullivan Stadium or Franklin High School Sullivan Stadium, not when it's hanging, but officially on paper.
Like for all the programs, you mean, or something?
We had talked to the Sullivans, Dave talked to the Sullivans about what they thought would be appropriate or what would be nice, and then we talked about it just to generate some ideas, but the intent was to be very simple, have one location, and it's often, anytime you go to any stadium, it's often, you say Lambeau Field, Packer Stadium, Sullivan Stadium. So it's, to put the Franklin Public Schools, we all are aware that it's Franklin Public Schools, it's our facility, so we just felt that the Sullivan Stadium is the way to go.
I understand that we're aware of what it is, but I'm going to reference an article from November 2013 about Indian Trail Falls to Franklin, and where they mention the Jerry Marsh Field. They say the playoffs will be at sloppy Jerry Marsh Field. And so they're talking about, so articles do mention where games are going to be played.
Right.
And so if it were to be mentioned, so now we're going to have a stadium rather than just a field. So if they mention a game is going to be at Sullivan Field, well, there is Sullivan versus Franklin, you know.
As a city.
Well, in all the
Yeah.
correspondence with, like WIA, or when Sarah puts out travel directions, other schools would get, it would say, directions to Sullivan Stadium in Franklin are this.
But that doesn't stop a reporter or,
Well,
you know.
that's a reporter. I mean, you can't base anything off an article that somebody writes. That's their opinion, and
But this is my opinion.
Sure, but I'm just saying that
I would
article
like-
doesn't depict
I would
anything.
like it officially, I mean, that's what I'm just giving my opinion.
Are you talking about like an official document, like
That
a
is-
certificate or something? Is
Well,
that
that,
what
I
you're
mean, that
talking
we
about?
officially, that we as a board officially name it either, I mean, I accept the Sullivan, but it's either officially Sabres Sullivan Stadium or Franklin Sullivan Stadium or Franklin High School Sullivan Stadium. But when it's hanging there, it can just be called Sullivan. But, so that it's known that this is Franklin.
Yeah, I think we're losing our identity. 'Cause
yeah.
We don't have Franklin, we don't have it in the auditorium name either. We're losing Franklin.
there's a big sign out in front that says Franklin Public Schools by the auditorium.
But that's not what I'm saying.
Mr. Bartel, say something.
I just wanted to reiterate that it's still Jerry Marsh Field. You were making your comments about the field. It's Sullivan Stadium, home of Jerry Marsh Field, so a good reporter is probably still going to say the game's going to be played at Jerry Marsh Field, because that is the name of the field. So, because you had mentioned Sullivan Field and things like that, it's still Jerry Marsh Field at the end of the day.
I think if you put too much into it, it clutters it all up and it takes away the impact. And after about a year, everybody will know it's Sullivan Stadium. That's just, the track meet, it's at Sullivan Stadium. The Walk for Life, it's at Sullivan Stadium. So our recommendation is that it be formally adopted as Sullivan Stadium as was requested.
I would make that motion.
Motion by Mrs. Larson. Is there a second?
I second that.
Second by Mrs. Klein. Is there any discussion?
I'd just like to say that I think that, I do agree that keeping the name simple might be best, and it's always going to be tied to Franklin. I mean, it is physically in Franklin, it is physically on the grounds of our high school, and I don't think that, that's diminished in any way or separated from Franklin. I don't know, that's just the way I look at it.
I appreciate that, but
And it was a very significant donation.
it was, but the taxpayers also are giving a big donation to this, and I think Franklin's important in the name also, so I'm not in favor of it, so that's.
Well, I mean, the fact that it'd be referred to as Sullivan Stadium, I don't think that would preclude any press reports or Sarah putting something out that, Franklin Sullivan Stadium at Franklin High
Yeah,
School.
that would be
or
on all of our
however it would be. I think the
documents.
more we're consistent with that, and maybe this is something maybe never really came up and she never really even thought of. And that maybe is something to be worth passing along to make sure that that's how we'd like it
Well, and I
referred
think
to.
the other thing is the committee was in favor of Sullivan Stadium, which is a large number of people as well.
Correct.
Did they consider Franklin Sullivan Stadium?
No.
Okay.
When you go to other schools, you don't see that. I understand your point, but I disagree. I mean, when you go to Greendale, you don't walk into Greendale High School's Roy Ryman Field. You're going to Panther Stadium. When you walk into our gym, you're not walking into Franklin High School's gym.
But-
You know where you're at, you know what it is.
You said-
And again, on paper, do whatever you want. That's a great idea. Franklin High School, Sullivan Stadium, outstanding. But to clutter it up on the sign.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't want to sign either.
And, you know, overthink this, I think, is just not needed.
I didn't say to clutter it up on the sign, I said to officially name it Franklin Sullivan Stadium or Sabre Sullivan, because Sullivan is it's a city, and I just, that's how I feel.
But would it be more clear, like, if we used their first names, what were they?
They didn't want that.
Oh, they don't want that.
They're very-
Okay,
they're
all
very
right.
Key people, they don't
Okay.
want big articles, and they're happy to help, they've got grandchildren in the district, and, they're really nice people, and they don't need the press releases and all the bells and whistles, they prefer just, they thought Sullivan Stadium was short, sweet, to the point, and a nice honor.
Any other, did you have a comment?
I would just say, I've been to many, many schools and their facilities over the years with my kids and participating in sports, and I've never called them by the name of the person that it's named after. You're going to Greendale, you're going to Kenosha, you're going here, you're going there. It's always the name of the school district or the specific school if they have more than one high school. So I know there's a name on them when I walk in. I see it, but everyone forgets it that I know. They always talk about it as being that school district that they're going to, just for what it's worth, I thought.
I agree
was-
with that.
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing. People are gonna say they're going to Franklin Stadium or Sabre Stadium to play football, or that's where the game's at. I do think that same thing.
Any other comments? Roll call, please. Oh, I'm sorry, we had a motion by Mrs. Larson, a second by Mrs. Klein.
Yes. Mrs. Evans?
No.
Mr. Alexandrovich?
Yes.
I say yes. Mrs. Witkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mrs. Larson?
Aye.
Mrs. Klein?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you. Okay. Item 8B is a budget discussion regarding Forest Park Middle School capital improvement projects. This is limited to the capital improvement projects, and this is requested by Mr. Nielsen.
Well, thanks for the flexibility to get this on the discussion tonight. I just wanted to, I heard something, it was last Thursday, I think it was, and in looking at the budget and looking at the list of what's scheduled for this year and what's on the list in total, for those of you that are a little closer to having kids at Forest Park, who either just went through there or familiar with this, but there's a office staff member that's positioned out in the parking lot in the morning when the buses pull in and when the parents pull up and when the parents drive up. And when the buses arrive, that person directs traffic to not allow the parents to drive up into the circle anymore for safety issues as kids are getting offloaded on the buses. And that process broke down this year in that she was being yelled at by the parents, swore at by the parents, and she made a decision she wasn't going to put herself through it anymore, and Mr. Reuter supported in that decision. So then we just didn't have a person out in the parking lot anymore. And so I got to looking at the list, and the project in question was number 49, redesign entrance loop and lot for $500,000 at the middle school. And I was able to get on our website and find this for the referendum question. And if you look at the traffic flow in here, this is done so nice. In my humble opinion, this is what I want to have the board have a discussion on. That 500,000, I think, has a much higher priority level than renovating pavement and improving drainage at Robinwood. Not to pit one school against another or one principal against another, but I think from a student safety standpoint, from a this district being able to put some money into the middle school that we weren't able to do as a result of the referendum, I think this would be a very, very nice and well-needed upgrade, and that the fence and the improvement for the drainage at Robinwood can wait. So I wanted to bring this to the board as a discussion item, and then we'll ask to have this project done first. Any thoughts?
Could you just tell us what the cost of the drainage and the fence?
Oh, sorry, 550,000. That was the second item listed on the improvements that I think was slated for this year. So we would actually have $500,000 less that we'd have to spend, understanding that 500 is probably an estimate. It's probably not completely nailed down.
Probably not accurate at all, based on this concept. Also, the planning for Robinwood started in January. The design and getting all the right things developed, talking to the neighbors about what we're doing to the fence line. I don't think you can get this done this year.
Can you come up to the microphone?
That very well may be the case, but then I guess what I would look at is, rather than us spending that money on the playground, then maybe we save that money, not spend that money this year, and know that this is definitely going to be earmarked for next year. I just think it's got such a high, more of a priority level than fixing the drainage in the playground.
And what item is it? Is it 44 on the list?
49 is what I saw on the list. And again,
49.
we just got the budget last week, I just got to looking through it, and then I heard the story, and my youngest just went through there, so I'm very familiar with the whole drop-off procedure, and we don't want our employees subject to that, and I think we don't want to just give in and say, well, then it should be a free-for-all with people dropping their kids off either.
And further to that point, is we talked about this last year, that we would be talking about budget items earlier this year so that the board would have time to look through it. And the budget was dropped off with these things to us last week. Did we see them, anybody see anything before that? I did, because I met with Mark.
And that's kind of why I wanted to have this
But
discussion now.
These kind of things, if we're talking about that they were being planned in January or February, I don't understand why the board wasn't brought in on that. So that if we have an issue like this coming up, we can resolve it, and we could have gone in either direction. We're slotted. We can do Robinwood, or we can do nothing and hold the money back for next year. I mean, somehow it just doesn't seem right.
Well, maybe I can address that in part, because when we planned for Robinwood, there was absolutely no intent for us to address this middle school issue at this time, because first of all, there's no way we could get it done this year. Impossible, because we didn't plan for it. But the bigger thing is that I think that drive and that particular system has to be taken in context with the bigger project, because we may, if we ever get to the building or a referendum of this school, we may bump this whole school out, further out, and it would affect that drive. I would hope we don't all of a sudden make a decision to put $500,000 because we got a bunch of rude parents. I think we got to bring, law enforcement or somebody else in to say, you're not going to treat people that way. I mean, it happens at the high school too, and, we do that, but in terms of this, I get your point, Alan, but I think it's because this was never even a consideration, because when the referendum failed, our intent was get this project going, come back and revisit this entire project as a whole. So that's why it wasn't look at one or the other, it was just look at a priority that Mark had looked at for Robinwood is.
Well, and that's kind of where I'm trying to just bring awareness to this project. I mean, I think Forest Park, well, it's got a whole block of projects where it is, maybe could be prioritized a little better. And I don't think we're gonna be able to chew off the whole thing. We certainly aren't gonna be able to do all the stuff we're talking about. That was the whole Fund 46 discussion. But something like this, I don't know what that number specifically is, but I think that's something that really should be bumped to the
And we did do,
top of the
we
list.
did do the library renovation, so.
Yes, we have been able to do something.
You did review and are willing to take off some of these different
Yes,
projects.
and I would agree with Mr. Nielsen that this will affect our parents and make it much more convenient for our parents. But if you've ever been on Robinwood's playground lately, especially during any of the snow melt times or any of the wet times, that project will affect children most directly. We have a principal who you can ask him. He has someone standing by the puddle, making sure that everybody stays out of it. It needs to be addressed. We're also expanding it to give them more room for the children to be able to stay on the asphalt during wet times of the day. We're redoing that fence so that we can get positive drainage and get that water off of the space. We're expanding one of the play structures a little bit to be able to add a piece of equipment, again, all to affect children. So my personal opinion is that's why this one is second, and in my mind even third, because next year I think we should be doing Pleasant View. Same issue, same inability to meet the playground needs of our students. I think Pleasant View should be your next priority next year. And maybe this can be considered in the future. Once we flesh this blues versus the golds versus what the actual additions are, because this is a concept, this has not really been fleshed out. That would be my recommendation.
Well, if nothing else, it was worthy of a discussion. Oh, sure. And all I could go with was the numbers I saw on the page. And the number I saw on the page was they redesigned entrance loop and lot for $500,000. And so, so I think, and maybe we need to have a capital improvement discussion. If we're talking about planning this stuff in January, then let's get everybody in the loop on it and see if we can, because we hear things that maybe you guys don't hear. And so we can provide that feedback. I mean, was that news about that employee who's no longer stationed out there? First time you've heard that?
Yeah.
First time I've heard it.
See, I think that's interesting to me.
And I've actually, I saw that employee out there in the spring.
I did too.
I went by there several times and that employee was out there. Or there was a employee, I don't know if it's the same one
Yeah, I don't
you're
know.
referring
I don't know
to.
say the
So
name,
so I would tell you now in June that 2015, I think we should be doing Pleasant View's playground, which also, it's probably going to be a much larger project when we get down to it, because there's also a swamp, a man-made swamp, running through the middle of that bisects it, and they're really struggling there. On top of that, the thing's kind of rocking and rolling.
Well, I don't want to do this for the benefit of the parents, just so we understand. I mean, this is, I think, a child safety issue as well. But when you have dropout, you have with the soccer and the lacrosse and any school events, and you get people that pull in to wait to pick up their kid, and then they got to back up when everyone's trying to get out. Then you got kids running in between cars because people are parking at the ECC. I think this is an issue, and if that's something that, I knew that this wouldn't be able to be accomplished this year with the planning that would be involved in the bidding and the time to do it, but I just wanted some awareness, I wanted to get it on the radar. So maybe that's a discussion to have about the Pleasant View, and that's something the board can decide as to, what to do.
There's no question it's an issue. And actually, there's a bigger issue after school is out in the spring here, when we have the track practices, and I think there's band or something going after school. It's worse after school than it is during the school drop-off and pickup. You ought to see what goes on out here. It's crazy. But I was going to ask the question, if we already have the Robinwood project in the budget, correct? Okay. Jim, if you get to the point where we have money that can go into Fund 46, to your point, we could dedicate that towards, if that's what we want to do, towards that project, and still be able to budget next year for Pleasant View's project in a normal fashion. So we could be somewhat addressing both of them at the same time.
We could, but with all due respect, I'd hate to put, even if we had to earmark something for Fund 46, and we don't know if we do or not, I really don't want this to wait 5 years.
Oh, I agree.
Well, then if it goes into 46, then it has to wait 5 years. That's my point. So I don't think I think we need to find a way to get this done sooner than that. And I don't know what the price tag would be on the Pleasant View project, but if the Robinwood project and this is, and maybe we need to revisit this to get a harder number.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if with all this site planning, knowing that we're gonna do this thing in phases, we have to be, you know, proactive and, or project out how we're gonna do this. If this number is 1.5 and not 500, well, then that's a whole different discussion. But I was just going with what was in front of me on the paper, and
You'll notice it's also in the next item, the first 8 million, phase 1. There's also an item in there for site parking, I think it's called, on the very next item on that list. So it's really in 2 places.
well, I just,
And I think if we do move it forward, we just all need to understand that we'll need to do we'll need to spend some money on fleshing out this plan to make sure that and it's not this piece that I'm worried about. This is a good piece.
okay.
It's what happens and how much of this becomes a throwaway because we put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, well, and
And that's what I don't want.
maybe there's too many moving parts to tackle it, but again, without asking the questions, I didn't know, and nor would anybody else sitting up here, so I appreciate your feedback, but this is what I wanted to bring to the board, and thanks for allowing me to put it on there.
Well, I think we'll start the ball rolling as far as trying to get some defined figures of what that's gonna cost, so.
That'd be good. Yeah, thank you.
We do that.
Any other discussion? Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 Sub 1 Sub E to discuss the future purchase of a specific property. Do I hear that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Nielsen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Alexandrovich. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Larson? Aye. Mrs. Witkowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Klein?
Aye.
I say yes. Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Alexandrovich?
Yes.
Motion carries. We'll enter into closed session. Does anyone need a recess?
2 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quick one. All right, we'll take a 3-minute recess. Okay, we're now back into open session, and we are into item 10, board meeting debriefing. Are there any comments from the board?
I think there were a number of items that were probably posted later in the day, and we don't always get a chance to review and think about things before we get to the meeting. I think I would appreciate if maybe we can work on that.
I think if we have agenda items that have items from a previous meeting that are pertaining to this meeting, it might be helpful to have them put into the current meeting to alleviate any problems also. That could be helpful. Any other comments?
No, but other than I agree with Linda, because sometimes I can't get to things too early, and when they come up real late, I walk in here and go, what's this? So, yeah, it would be nice if they were out there, at least the day before.
Any comments from the administration on that at all?
I think we try not to do that. This was a tight one. Kind of decided last week that was okay. My son graduated this weekend. I had a day off to get the house ready for 100+ people to come over and 12 people to stay with us, so it was kind of tight when I got back to get it done. But I definitely agree, and we like to get them on there as early as possible.
Congratulations.
Last one.
It's
No
high
wonder
school
you had a big
graduation?
party.
High school, yeah.
Okay. Future agenda items. July 16th, we have the district budget update. July 16th, the City of Franklin Anti-Tobacco Billboard Awards presentation. Kathy Hahn will be here from the Health Department. Did, Dr. Paz, did you get a response on the retreat?
I didn't get them from everybody yet, but I'll double check and I'll get something out tomorrow, too.
Okay.
Can I add a potential future agenda item? Sorry, Melissa.
Go ahead.
Could we have on a future agenda item, a discussion on the personal finance class?
Personal finance class?
Yeah, there's a personal finance class, and I've taken a look at some of the other districts and what they've done with that class and some grants that are available and just a board.
Are you looking to see what we do, what our class entails?
Yeah, what we do, and if we might pursue some of that funding, if that's available from a grant, and maybe look at that class as a requirement, or getting more of the kids involved in some of that class. I have some opinions on sending our students out of here with some personal finance knowledge. I think would be very helpful.
That would be also a good topic for whoever has curriculum to meet with Wendy, talk about that too, prior to that meeting.
Because we had that conversation with the econ class and all that. It's not a requirement, but that's embedded in other areas. But this particular class, I think, has a lot of components in it, and I think in the age we live in, arming our kids, being as college and career ready and real world ready as they can when they get out of here, I think that'd be a great class.
Melissa?
Oh, I just had a question about this July 16th agenda item on the district budget update. Is that an update on how we did in the previous year's budget, or is that more of a discussion and an adoption of the
It's
budget that you
discussion and
presented
adoption.
last time? Okay.
Yeah, it's not really an update. I don't have
The terminology
anything.
just scared,
Yes.
confused me a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so you still are looking for any comments from the board prior to that?
right.
Right. And then you'll also have included in that figures for the police school liaison, and then
Right.
0% budget figures.
The impact for it.
Levy, yeah, okay.
And would that be available before the meeting? As opposed to at the meeting?
I don't know how long it'll take to get the figures on the school liaison officer.
School liaison, that shouldn't take that long, those will certainly be estimates, because I'm sure, but they're gonna be close.
Yeah.
As far as the 1% and the 0 and that kind of thing, Jim can nail that, so that shouldn't be too difficult to get out real quick.
And the other item?
What was the other one?
There wasn't another one.
There was Tim's request for what would be possible for a zero tax levy increase. He asked for
That's what he
just-
said.
I just said
Oh,
that.
that one, okay.
That's what he's talking about.
Anything else?
With that police liaison, could we have some, do they keep behavior records at the high school? How many incidents there are, how many times the police have to be called, how long it takes the police to get there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they
Can we
do.
get that information too?
Sure.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Nilsson, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Alexandrovich. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? We are adjourned at 8:13.